Hello everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matthew McFederick, and alongside Eileen, Jane and Gabriella, I have been tasked with organising today's symposium. Just to say, it's a real delight to see you all here and to see such a busy room. And also to add, if you are like me and you've been writing furiously for the various notes relating to Roma's talk and Arnold's keynote this morning, we are filming today's event and it will be available hopefully within the next week or two on the UAL Wimbledon YouTube page. So if you want to go back to the videos, they should be there. Okay. And on that note, it is my responsibility to introduce our next speaker, which I'm really delighted to say is Dick Straker. Dick is a video and projection designer whose practice spans across theatre, opera and fashion shows. In 1992, he formed Mesmer, a company for projection and video creatives, and he started the very first video department here at the National Theatre in 1999 and designed projection for numerous productions, including the Powerbook, Coast of Utopia and Jumpers. And indeed, Dick remains a very familiar face here at the NT, having recently designed Peter Gynt in the Olivier Theatre last year. Also to add, his video and projection designs for opera and theatre have been staged right across the UK and internationally. And just to give you a couple of examples, those that may be familiar with you are A Monster Calls at the Old Vic, Greek at the Scottish Theatre, Cymbeline at the RSC, and Hitchcock Blonde at the Royal Court. Beyond his designs for opera and theatre, Dick has also designed for many seminal events, including Alexander McQueen's Savage Beauty exhibition at the V&A and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And he is also a lecturer of digital theatre design at Wimbledon College of Art. And it gives me great pleasure today to introduce Dick's talk, which is on Vicarious reality.
Okay, hi everybody. So I'm going to start. So reality, VR, vicarious reality. Maybe not the reality that springs to mind. Mixed, augmented, virtual and simulated. There are many current definitions surrounding expressions of reality, and these definitions and the fluid interpretation of the terminology are rebounding into theatre and performance from more technocultural practices and are generating some confusion about what is or isn't new, cutting edge, influential and significant. I want to talk about a number of interconnecting issues that relate to my own practice as a video and projection designer, working in theatre, and the internal and external dialogue that I have with the technology that I use as part of my practice. I use the term vicarious reality to somewhat mock the belief that assumed new realities are a groundbreaking and transformative influence on theatre and performance, when they have often originated in theatre and then been re-assimilated into it as something new. My main concern is that because new waves of technology require innovation and newness as their core branding values, the competing seductive spectacles that are being sold often masquerade emotions and marvels without adding very much meaningful value. A parallel observation is with the Baroque and how this huge cultural movement was used to embellish, decorate and glorify the institutions of royalty, church and state in previous centuries with an overly embellished and somewhat grotesque value. I've gone to a different presentation. I think the current technologies for creating live visual environments in performance are primarily promoting the same sense of awe, visual exuberance, colour and spectacle for what in the 16th century, when the Baroque was largely perceived as a florid and capricious, Michel de Montaigne called the bizarre and uselessly complicated. I feel there is a strong Baroque impulse in digital tools of contemporary theatre, and they cross over into other cultural forms as they did in the previous centuries. Our dependency on technology has replaced our dependency on royalty and religion, and some of our most powerful leaders are now the tech entrepreneurs. There is a lot of terminology in this discussion. Many of the definitions inform the digital fetishism that now prevails. The definitions have become increasingly interesting to me because of their misuse and ease with which they can be used to misrepresent what is happening. Starting from the basic terms for this discussion, I'm classified and credited as a video designer, preferably a video and projection designer, but I've always had difficulty with the term video because it seems tied to something consumerist and meretricious, a flashy, transient commercial term from the grubby, maggot-ridden 80s. This video is from a live stream during a modern Scottish opera version of Oedipus, set in those Maggie-ridden 80s, which is the pun in the opera. Maybe my unease with video is because I spent 12 years projecting and producing images on actual film, and before video became a ubiquitous and unavoidable medium. Film has a much grander and elevated status as a medium, so much so that most videographers call themselves filmmakers and have therefore made the term interchangeable. But dig a little deeper and you find that the Latin term videre, from which video derives, simply means to see, and was altered to bring it in line with the term audio when television was invented. Actually, the status of the term no longer really matters, because even a great film cinematographer like Roger Deakins, with 2 Oscar nominations and 15 nominations, has also made music videos for the likes of Tracy Ullman and Meatloaf. Moving on with more technology. Video projection has perverted the term hologram with an awkward misrepresentation of what has previously, as we know, been called Pepper's Ghost, and to such an extent that the practice of photography is starting to be recognised, and would make Henry Pepper turn in his grave, which is in South London Cemetery in Norwood. Short bus ride away. Holography has been referenced in sci-fi novels, movies, and TV from the 1970s onwards, with writers enthused by pushy scientists and early tech entrepreneurs, and became an easier way to brand the Pepper's Ghost illusion that had existed in theatre for 150 years. In 2006, I designed the projection system for the Alexander McQueen show that presented Kate Moss as a Pepper's Ghost. But it was immediately branded a hologram, and is generally understood to be a hologram. But this was simply a marketing strategy, along with the Gorillaz Demon Days tour, the Tupac and Snoop Dogg at Coachella, Burberry's 2011 show, and innumerable other events and products to which the term holo was added, and in which CEOs often starred. Holo indeed. Boom, boom. The adaptable fictional depictions of the technology from popular culture allowed for these marketing strategies. And it works because audiences are attracted to the notion of holograms because they have come to represent a pinnacle of the magical, transformative technological achievements that we can aspire to witness. It's another garment in the wardrobe of the emperor's new clothes for our tech-hungry culture. And our belief, rather than reality, is everything for the branding. I'm now showing a sequence of images from the previously mentioned Oedipus opera called Greek. Everything on the screen is from a live, on-view camera in the orchestra pit, operated by the singers. It's all real, all live, all freshly cooked, for every performance, and there is no pretense at deception. So the definition we really need to grasp is reality, and the spectrum of meanings that this can relate to. The current definitions, and we saw the diagram before from Arnold, place mixed reality across the centre of a spectrum between a completely real environment and a completely simulated environment, SR. They include augmented realities, AR, in which the assistive digital technologies are superimposed over real-world visualizations and also augmented virtualities, in which virtual environments contain real elements. Using the term vicarious reality is intended to mock these definitions and also embrace Baudrillard's notion of the simulacra and the substituted reality, the pretense, the fluid and proxy realities that we are increasingly drawn into. Perceived reality has become symbolic. That's the live camera, bottom left corner, which is being projected directly onto the screen behind the performers. So what he's doing over there is what we see. Using the term vicarious reality, sorry, I'm skipping on a little bit. I'm a little bemused that the theatrical practice, which has always had degrees of mixed reality, could now become rebranded as a live mixed reality, LMR, and placed somewhere on the reality spectrum as more imaginary than augmented reality, but not as virtuous as augmented virtuality. Bear in mind that in the context of mainstream UK theatre, which is largely concerned with presenting realism and naturalism, otherwise known as romantic theatre, here the stage represents an accurate illusion of reality, which is often heightened, exaggerated, and focused, and the level of realism is twisted for a dramatic effect. We have a sophisticated concept of the suspension of disbelief, which we employ to immerse ourselves in an event which we know to be unreal, yet which we want to believe is the current reality that we are experiencing. Antonin Artaud understood this in the 1930s and coined the phrase reality virtuelle. Yes, virtual reality existed in the 1930s, in his work on the theatre of cruelty and the theatre in its double, in which he proposed a theatre that was in effect a return to the magic and ritual he sought to create with a new theatrical language of totem and gesture, a language in a space devoid of dialogue that would appeal to all the senses. He said, "Words say little to the mind compared to a space thundering with images and crammed with sounds." Artaud proposed a theatre in which violent physical images crushed and hypnotised the sensibility of the spectator, seized by a theatre with a whirlwind of higher forces. He considered formal theatres and their proscenium arches and playwrights with their scripts as a hindrance to the magic of genuine ritual. Now, with the advent of virtual reality headsets, we seem to conveniently forget that radical theatre from nearly 100 years ago, in a pre-digital age, coined the term that is now being repurposed by commercial corporations for mainstream entertainment. Mixed reality is in effect being reverse-engineered back into theatre by the spectacle industry. The stage has always been a place of fluid and hybridised forms and technology, and has often been enhanced by it. But we should be careful of claiming a radical departure and overstating perceived new forms without referencing their histories. More about my practice. And enough of the historical contexts. Before coming to my present practice, I want to quickly reminisce about two productions from nearly 20 years ago. Coast of Utopia, first staged here on the Olivier stage in 2003, was followed by The Woman in White, a musical at the Palace Theatre in 2005. They used essentially the same set design by Bill Dudley, who is a great advocate of digital image production for theatre. He made the design highly dependent on video projection, and I designed the projection system and directed the team delivering the projection design. Due to the technical limitations in 2003, there were many shortcomings in the overall effect created. But there was a huge leap in the capabilities over the 2 years between these productions and the ability to deliver a mixed reality of performance against a projected backdrop. The final software system built specifically for the show was never commercially developed, but it had unique features for mapping video in a three-dimensional stage space that remained unsurpassed for a decade. But my eventual response to this now ubiquitous media server method of delivery was to react against the overwhelming technological dependency. The process didn't have the fluidity I wanted for image development within the staging process. And the sticking point for me was a combination of a dependency on both the programmer and on the software developer. Delivering and contributing to a director's intent and a scenographer's vision required a lot of dialogue with technical team members who can't always engage the technology with the performative, literary or staged context in which the performance needs to exist for an audience to fully engage and have empathy. So my approach became simpler, with more emphasis on image creation phase and requiring less input during the programming phase on stage. I also placed more emphasis on the projection design, including turning the lights down, optimizing the optics for the restrictions of the set and staging, considering the surfaces for displaying the projected imagery, and avoiding an over-dependency on solving all of these issues digitally. They all require consideration early in the process, and give a little more control in my process rather than in that of the more specialized programmer. However, unlike me, designers who have developed from a trained technical background function a lot more freely in the specialized technical environment and subsequently have influenced the direction of the industry. As Marshall McLuhan observed, we shape our tools and then they shape us. I'm now going to focus on a series of opera productions I did with the designer Joanna Parker, which were directed by Annabelle Arden. On each occasion, the surface material for the projection had been critical for the content that would be projected onto it. And the first time we developed this method was for an opera at Aldborough Festival called The Commission in 2014. We started the process while the set was being constructed and filmed the painting of the screen in the workshops. This filming was then used as projection back onto the screen and animated the gestural textures and marks that were tracking the behaviour of key characters in the performance. The relationship between the content creation and the final staging was a developing dialogue between the filmed material, the filming process, the video post-production and the staging. And through this process, the surfaces on which the projection happened developed the staged reality of the piece. The next occasion was for an Opera North production in 2016 of the opera Andrea Chénier. It's about a poet and set during the French Revolution, where every character in the piece is imprisoned by their fate according to the outcome of the revolution. We took the surface materiality to another level by using multi-layered hanging chain link curtains. Projecting onto chain is not something you would normally do unless the surface materiality was an intrinsic part of the meaning of the piece. The oppressive atmosphere was represented by the 200 square metres of chain surrounding the stage to a height of 6 metres. This materiality was both a visual symbol of the events and a practical solution to multiple staging issues. The process of creating the projected content used a large sheet of perspex having buckets of paint thrown at it whilst filming in slow motion from behind and in front. Projecting the movement of this paint down the chains became a texture that tracked the descent of the onstage terror. The collisions of the splattering paint represented the impact of the revolutionary events, followed by the slow and tortuous consequences, and it created a lot of choices, after the filming and during the staging. Between the scenes, the stained, scrawled writing showed the internal reality and thoughts of the condemned poet by using a traditional gauze bleed-through projection. And during the arias, the projected paint would drip down the chains. Joanna had recognised the intensity of mark-making in the work of Cy Twombly, albeit far more developed than we could achieve, but the power of the gesture and the constant reiteration as a statement that imposes its physical state underscored our reality. You see the chains a little bit better here. This self-evidently only works when image is congruent with the stage actions, the voice, the narrative, and the other technical elements of sound, lighting, and movement, all engaging the audience in the same experience. In this case, having relatively slow process of paint dripping behind the stage action for the duration of an aria has a growing intensity because the movement of the paint has an inevitable outcome, and it's generally not distracting. It's part of the material experience of the staging method without demanding attention. In the wider context of other productions that demand large and spectacular crescendos, it's a bit like watching paint dry. But that's why I like it. The technology is not distracting attention, and the visual augmentation of the theatrical reality is an underscore to the narrative and not competing for primacy. What became important was the overall integration of the filmed content with the material surface in the context of the performance. The finale of the opera was stripped back to the very basics of colour and slight texture, and the doomed lovers disappeared through the chain into an ultraviolet death. The symbolic material for the Carmen staging at the Grange Festival in 2017 was a traditional Andalous shawl. Experimenting with projection on this black silky surface revealed it could reflect light under certain circumstances, but it needed a large scale to do it for sufficient legibility. The upstage arc of the stage was enclosed in a cloth made from over 200 shawls. But before building the stage, it was made up in a workshop and filmed with motion created by wind machines. The wind-generated wave motion and the silky iridescence were suggestive of a crow's plumage, and this became part of a motif for both observation and predation, which were themes in the opera we wanted to explore. I filmed crows in various locations, but all the other elements were filmed in studio-constructed film sets using rotating parabolic mirrors applied with paint that transformed the reflective surfaces. The themes we wanted to explore in Carmen's representation were apparent in advance, but the visual elements of this representation emerged as we built our filmic language during the filming, our visual language during the filming. The crow's eye in close-up became the sun and the moon. And this type of process is exactly what doesn't happen for me using more complex software and programmer-based combinations as the main part of my process. The software presupposes certain end-user pathways and is written to support this. The programmer's familiarity with these pathways also influences the options that are put on the table for a designer. And there is now a growing tendency for promoting the use of various real-time generative softwares, such as Notch, Houdini, and Unreal Engine. The more fluid, organic, and unpredictable routes presented by the methods I've been describing are restricted by the scope of the software-driven processes, and often don't facilitate the kind of results that actually interest me. Aida is another case in point. It was a semi-staged performance, meaning that it happens within an existing space that is only partially designed. A much more conceptualized location is needed, as there was neither the intention or the resources to create a fully staged space. Initially, this was quite a challenging problem that depends on our ability as an audience to facilitate our suspension of disbelief. Knowing that Leeds Town Hall is always going to have a strong presence within ancient Egypt, the staging gestures can be potentially more liberated to be just that, the gestures. The real world is never going to disappear, and the audience are very familiar with it, so any additions are obvious items augmenting the space. You accept as designers and audience that this is the case, and you can choose to enter the experience regardless of the missing visual information. It could be argued, though, that an augmented reality headset could overlay a more fully designed version onto the empty space, and this is entirely possible. But I can't imagine a sufficiently good reason for wanting to do this. I'm rather more interested in the audience attempting to understand the semi-staged physical and symbolic design and trusting their individual responses, including a failure to respond, than I am in trying to generate the whole thing as a digital artifice. I don't believe this is my innate reluctance to embrace the augmented reality approach, and I hope it's become apparent why I'm not just being simplistically negative in dismissing it. I again had a screen surface as a starting point for Aida. The point of this production was to reflect an ancient Egypt into a modern-day Syria. The traditional setting for Aida was a 19th century Orientalist fantasy version of an ancient kingdom and the conflict between glorious Egypt and exotic Ethiopia. It's a highly stylized colonial perspective, and today it seems worthwhile questioning the glorified warfare in the context of the almost neighbouring and equally ancient Syria. So the screen was designed by Joanna as both a sailcloth come makeshift tent canvas sourced from a refugee shelter. The screen is important. It's an emotional sculpture anchored in real objects. In a more virtualized software-based design environment, I doubt whether the screen would develop in this emotional way and have the subsequent influence on the content projected onto it. And the other material we chose to work with was porcelain. And I was reminded of the notion of aura in Walter Benjamin's essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. In it, Benjamin recognised a perceptual shift that takes place when technology emphasising speed and reproducibility loses the presence and aura in the work of art as it's been reproduced. His argument related to 20th century techniques, and now we are dealing with 21st century technology. But I always sense a similar denuding of the aura and presence in the rush to generate a digital wonderment. Some of the work's meaning can lie in the time and place in which the piece is made, and this is lost in an environment of virtual creation and presentation. We also had genuine drone footage from conflict documentary maker Shahida Telenogova, shot inside Aleppo. The juxtaposition of this material against the music of Verdi was remarkable, and no amount of artificial creation to simulate another reality could increase the emotional response of a grand operatic celebration of noble warfare against the current destruction of a city. Of course, many opera-goers want to see the grand spectacle, and a contemporary juxtaposition is disconcerting. It doesn't correspond to the romantic preconceptions of what a traditional version of Aida usually gives. And if we had used an augmented digital overlay, which more literally spelt out the parallels, then the audience's process of an engagement would have been very different, and the collective learning during the performance and coming to terms with this version would have been experienced differently. The use of the porcelain was due to its material fragility and the way it dries, cracks, and responds to light. The body doubles we filmed had been painted with wet porcelain and made gestures relevant to the singer's gestures. It was soon apparent, however, that the wet clay, which we had initially intended to use, dried, and then the cracking texture was far more interesting and closer to the narrative significance we needed. The breaking and fractured clay had a strong connection to the destroyed concrete city. We filmed many combinations of porcelain-encrusted movements, gestures, and fragments, and it was then ultimately used by one of the singers during the performance. You can see on his forearms and hands. The screen facets were broken down and masked in the projection to control which parts of the image and the footage were visible on the screen, and also included a live camera feed from Aida's cell. In summary, you may have sensed my slightly cynical approach to the notion of augmented, virtual, simulated, and mixed realities. And this is not because I believe there is no place for them in theatre and performance. Undoubtedly there is, and we'll see better and more interesting applications in the near future. My concern lies with some of the underlying influences that drive the technology. Invariably, it's a technology that is expensive and often intrusive, and tied to the impulse to sell innovation and newness for a bigger and better spectacle. But the ideas are not new. Technology always delivers more options for transformational experiences, and historically we've had many previous instances from the camera obscura, magic lanterns, zoetropes, and cinema. Theatre and cinematic history is full of this entrepreneurial spirit, trying to make a buck and wow an audience. Relatively recently, with Henry Pepper's Ghost, the Lumiere brothers and Georges Méliès's cameras, Erwin Piscator and Joseph Svoboda's projections. The shadows, smoke and mirrors, optical illusions, persistence of vision and suspension of disbelief characterize many years of sensory experimentation. We have witnessed the recent addition of digital technology to this obsession, and the playground of reality has been stretched and distorted with the dynamism and dominating forces that digital technology has taken to most parts of our lives. It's a basic desire to engage our senses with an experience and a performance, and a feature of our requirement for stimulation as we voraciously feed on new stimuli. We can't help it or resist it, and our senses have an appetite for spectacle that can't be fully satisfied. And the senses that are most easily fed are audio and vision, AV, the AV industry. So it doesn't feel to me like anything new or special. From ancient Greece to the Baroque, Victorian theatre and early film, the digitally generated realms are part of this continuity. And I want to leave you with a thought, almost as John Baldessari commented. For video designers who want to sell, subject matter is important. Designs with skies and water in them collect dust, whilst the same designs with tempests and torrents sell very, very well. Thank you very much, and I also want to thank Joanna Parker and Maria Christopher Rideau, who were part of this and helped me put it together. Thank you very much.
Thanks.